Okay, good. So you say you have a list.
Okay, yes. Is prayer alone sufficient hishtadlus against illness or avoid becoming, for recovery or becoming ill, where you wouldn't need medication or inoculation?
Let's take our example from Yaakov Avinu, from Jacob. He hears that Esau is coming to meet him with 400 men, and they're not coming to roll out the red carpet. And it says he was afraid. So what did he do? Well, one thing he did was he sent a very elaborate gift, call it bribe, to his brother with very obsequious messages. This is from your servant Jacob, etc., etc. That's one thing he did. Another thing he did was he split his camp in two to prepare for war, so that if Esau will attack one camp, the other camp will be able to survive. And the third thing he did was to pray. So if we take Jacob as a template, as we should, he didn't just pray. He didn't. And then he didn't omit prayer either. Now, from what a person does, it's not easy to draw conclusions about what could have happened in other cases and what must be done and how could it possibly be different. It's not easy to draw, but you can certainly draw a norm from it that he prepared to take charge of the circumstances with his own resources and prayed to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. You could take another example of Abraham. Abraham's nephew, Lot, was captured in a war. What did Abraham do about that? Well, he didn't just pray. He didn't even, as is customary in war with captives, go and bargain to ransom him. He brought together a military force and fought a battle to defeat the victors in that war. He didn't just pray and ask Kodesh Baruch Hu to do it. The norm is that you take whatever practical, realistic, physical, materialistic measures are relevant, you make use of them, and you pray. Could there be people who didn't need to pray? Could there be people who are on such a high level that they wouldn't need to do any practical measures? Yes, they could. Yes, they could. But number one, I don't know about you, but I'm not prepared to assume that I'm that kind of person, number one. The Kitzur Shulchan Aruch certainly is against it. If you have an illness, you must go to a doctor. If you don't go to a doctor, you're a sinner. And Rav Dessler, who has this wonderful essay, B'tom hishtadlus, preceded by Neis V'Teva, says that even people who were on level to command miracles and didn't need to do hishtadlus, they volunteered to do the effort themselves because it's appropriate to do it even if you don't need it. Even if you, strictly speaking, could manage without, it's appropriate to do it anyway. So the bottom line is, yes, you take whatever naturalistic measures are reasonable, and you also pray for it. The Sefer HaMaspik, Lo Avdei Hashem, written by the Rambam's son, Avram, has a long section on hishtadlus, and he says under all circumstances you should do the hishtadlus that's appropriate. And in the case of Yonasan, who went out to an enemy army, he and his armor bearer, the two of them, which in naturalistic terms was certain death. So Rabbi Rambam says, he's not doing what I told you is the rule. We must assume that he had Ruach HaKodesh. That HaKadosh Baruch Hu directly inspired him to do that. Otherwise, he wouldn't have done it. And I think, although I don't remember him saying it, but I think here, Yonasan went and did something which is against the rules, and nowhere in the tradition is he criticized for that. How do you account for the fact that someone goes against the rules and isn't criticized? Answer is because since HaKadosh Baruch Hu inspired him to do it, it wasn't against the rules for him. But in general, those are the rules. So that's the general answer to your question. Yeah.
I guess a quick follow-up on that. Did we have medicine in the time of the prophets when you wouldn't need to go to a doctor, you just went to a prophet?
So there was medicine, but Ramban says that during that 1,000 years, no one went to a doctor. There were doctors, But you didn't have to go to a doctor, and indeed it was a kind of, so it was a spiritual failure to do that because your physical condition is only a symptom of your spiritual condition. And if a person has a physical ailment of some kind, in medicine they'll tell you don't treat the symptoms, treat the disease. So if a person has a physical ailment of some kind, he would go to a prophet and say, what does the Kodesh Baruch Hu want from me? And the prophet would tell him what spiritual element he should repair, and then the physical element would go away. But when the Kodesh Baruch Hu ended prophecy, he changed our condition. Now he said, I don't want you to be able to know. I don't want you to be able to get that information. And that being the case, you have to go to doctors. And I can tell you that the leaders of the generations go to the doctors. My Rebbe Zatzal ran a medical referral service, which his son, Gottleib, runs now in Boston, and people come from all over the world, and including the greatest scholars and the greatest tzaddikim, come to get expert medical help. So that's the. I have a section on this on my book, which will be coming out. So, yeah.
It's a two-parter. First, I just want to. I heard that it's okay to be jealous of somebody else's middos in terms of Yiddishkeit. Like if somebody's on a high level, you're allowed to be jealous of their and aspire to their level. Is that true? Does that sound vaguely?
Well, the word jealous is a tricky word. I know it's in Hebrew it's kina and sometimes translated as jealous, but now let's just analyze the meaning of the word since we're using it, we're speaking English, and see what it is exactly we want to mean. It starts with he has something and I don't have, and it makes me feel bad. But in which direction does my bad feeling go? Am I looking that I don't want to be inferior to him, so I'm hoping that he'll lose what he has? That's vicious. That's envy. And if that's the kind of jealousy a person's experiencing, he needs help. He's in a very bad spiritual state. And they certainly shouldn't have that kind of jealousy. And since the word kina is used with respect to Kodesh Baruch Hu, certainly that's not what it means there. Kodesh Baruch Hu doesn't wish that we wouldn't have it, because the way our having it makes him feel inferior, and therefore, no, that's probably not what it means there. If you mean, you see the other person, you say, well, he has it and I don't. Look how wonderful it is that he has it. Look how beautiful it is that he has it. I wish I also had it. That's something positive. You could take inspiration from something that somebody else has and think, see how valuable it is, and say, I wish I had it also. Now, if that's what you call jealousy, I'm not sure that in English that sentiment would be captured by the word jealousy. Jealousy, I think, is something where I don't want the inequality, and I'll be very happy if it's solved by his losing what he has. And that's certainly vicious and inappropriate. So if you mean the idea that the inequality provokes me into thinking that I would be better if I could have that, and together with the assumption that I could have it, or at least it seems to be possible that I should have it, and that pushes me to strive to have it, then yes, that would be an appropriate feeling. And indeed, we have a description of, now I'm putting this in because I believe that's true, the initial stage of the whole world to come, only the initial stage. This cannot continue forever, and that's called echad nichva michupasu shechavero. Each person looks at the chuppah, like when you get married, you go out under a canopy. So there's a canopy made for great people when they arrive. People are coming to the world, Olam Haba, and the chuppah indicates what he's accomplished in his lifetime. And A looks at the chuppah that B has and says, wow, he did all of that. He managed all of that. Then I certainly could have managed more than I did. And he's singed by looking at the chuppah of the friend because he realizes how much more that he could have done and regrets the fact that he didn't do it. And since that's something which is this initial stage of Olam Haba, I say it's initial because it's painful, and the idea of pain going on forever in Olam Haba is a very difficult, tricky idea. Most of the sources I saw reject that idea wholesale. But the initial stage is a realistic, and there the implication is I should have done more. Not that I wish he hadn't accomplished what he accomplished. So that, so I don't think the word jealousy in English really captures that idea. But that's the kind of idea that would be appropriate to have. That was the first part of the question.
First part, okay. There's a good clarification.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to understand what the difference between maybe like jealousy is maybe not the right word. Again, I'm just gonna use it and you do whatever you want with the word jealousy. But the difference between jealousy and like a goal. So if I go to work soon, right, and I start out at the bottom level, if I look at a guy who's 3 promotions above me, I say, wow, look at this guy's life. Like his life's awesome. He's got a big house and a nice family and a good car, whatever, both material and spiritual, he has it going on. If I look at that guy, I say, wow, I really want that guy's life. Problem?
I know what you mean, right?
I don't mean like
we just had the 10 pronouncements of Sinai, right? The last one was about I want his house, I want his cow, I want his wife.
Okay, not his.
Okay.
I want a comparable life.
Right. So again, that's the second kind of thing that I was talking about. And I think that's perfectly appropriate. You see what people have managed. And of course, the emphasis should be on the spiritual side, not on the physical side. And if you see what people manage, you think, wow, that's available and something that's beautiful and valuable, and I should make an effort to achieve it for myself. That's perfectly okay.
So if a person is looking at another person's life and they say that they really want that, how can they not feel bad about their own life? Because one would feel insufficient. Or should we feel bad to drive us?
So it depends on what you mean. First of all, the Torah does not forbid feeling bad. In fact, one of the ingredients of tshuva is regret. And regret is a painful feeling. The word bad carries an evaluation which isn't quite right. It's not. I don't wish that I didn't have it. No, feeling pain over something is quite appropriate when the thing is worthy of pain. And as you just said, if it motivates you to do more, to try to achieve more, then it in fact can be a very positive element. There's a famous saying which you will hear, especially in yeshivas, "Kina sofrim tar b'chochma." Kina, sometimes it's translated as jealousy, and sometimes it has all the nuances that I described in it a few minutes ago. And it says it increases wisdom, and the picture that you get is that the pounding on the tables and the yelling and screaming, that's the kina sofrim. And when you do that, when you go to the base measures, you can see that sometimes, right? That's what increases wisdom. So say our sages. Yeah, but the Maharsha says that statement of our sages is grade B, not grade A. That's grade B, not grade A. Because our sages say something else in addition. Divrei chachamim benachas nishmoim. The words of the wise are heard in peacefulness, calmness. The scholarship of the land of Israel was superior to the scholarship of Babylonia because hayu nochim zeh lezeh b'halacha. They were pleasant and comfortable to each other when they were discussing halacha, as against the yelling and screaming that you had in Babylonia. So yes, it can function to do that, but it can function to increase wisdom, but it's not the ideal. And in fact, I was talking about this with a friend of mine who's a very strong Talmid Chacham, and he said, if you go back and look at the Gemara Bava Basra, where it says those words, you'll see that it's talking about the following case. You have a city, and in the city there's someone who teaches the children, and another person presents himself as a teacher of children and wants to open up, set up competition, and we have a general rule against competition, sagas gvul, that if there's a need in a city and there's someone fulfilling the need, and there really isn't a constituency for two, then the second one shouldn't open up and challenge the position of the first one. He shouldn't do that. And that's true with, as far as I know, all types of competition except Torah. In case of Torah, we encourage it. And the description of the Gemara is, Kina sofrim tar b'chochma, because if you give the new one the job, If the old one is still there, he's going to be looking to shoot him down, isn't he? Because he lost his job to him. And that's going to mean that the new guy is going to be very careful. I better get this right. I better say it right. Because if I don't say it right, then he's going to shoot me down. And that way, the new teacher will be more careful, and the students will get better instruction. But obviously, replacing one person with another person, and the first one being envious of the second and wanting to shoot him down, is not the ideal spiritual situation. So to make it into an ideal is not quite right. So there too, what are you trying to accomplish? And if the yelling and screaming is to prove that I'm right, then it's very bad. It's very bad. I have this sometimes with people who are critical of religion, and one of the questions that I ask them is, when's the last time you changed your mind? Sometimes they have to think real hard because they're so sure they're right. They're so sure they're right. They're really fanatics, whether it's evolution or the age of the universe or scientific determinism, whatever it is, they're so sure they're right. I say to them, if you can't remember the last time you changed your mind, maybe you're not really objective about this. I change my mind several times a day, and on fairly substantial issues, once or twice a week. As I'm learning, I'm studying. I have chavrusas who are very smart, and they're very sharp, and I take a stab where it seems to me, and then often it's wrong. So if you're really out to prove you're right, it's going to be very hard for you to change your mind when somebody points out that there's a mistake. That's not a good state of mind to be in. Anyway, there's a little background for the idea. Yeah.
So you were talking about just now about changing your mind. So there's some times where I try and think about what I'm going to do. Let's say somebody comes up and wants is collecting stuff, and I have to think in my head can I afford this? Can I do it or not? And I keep on walking to think about it, and either I'll go back because I can do it, or there are times where I'll miss it. Is that a fault to think about?
No, but I would say it's a fault of lack of preparation. You should have money that's prepared for tzedakah, and ideally you put it in a separate compartment in your wallet or whatever, and you'll know how much you have there, and then you know whether you can do it or you can't. You have to stop and think each time that somebody comes and figure out.
I usually have, for me in particular, I usually have the amount of tzedakah that I give, but in the morning if I go to Dushinsky's, it's all gone because they're.
Well, okay, then the answer is you don't have to think about it. Just don't give. I mean, you have a certain amount of money that's important to give to tzedakah if you've given it out already. So then that's it.
For decisions in general, let's say, I don't know, in a general.
You see, the way you describe it, if you keep walking, then you already have an incentive to say no, because if you say yes, you got to walk back, and that unbalances the decision. It's not a balanced decision on its own merits. It's a decision, I'll tell you, from my own experience of myself, if it's a question of shall I take a coat or shall I not take a coat, shall I bring this or shall I bring that, I've trained myself to say yes because I'm afraid that the no side is just laziness. So I know I'm unbalanced that way. So I'm overbalancing it with the other. So if you're aware of that, then you say, no, I'm not going to keep walking while I make the decision, and then I'll have to decide to walk back, because that'll bias the decision. So I wouldn't do it that way. But in the case of giving tzedakah, it shouldn't be something that every time somebody comes and asks, you have to think again, shall I or shall I not? You should have a policy, you should have it organized, and be able to do it straight. Yeah.
Do you have a preferred translation of the Chumash, like Art Scroll or Koran, and or commentary that if I were to go to a store and get one for myself that I could read through in English?
It's a very difficult question. First of all, you have to ask yourself, what do you want from a translation? Do you want the translator to do the work of putting all of the nuances of meaning that are found in the commentaries into his translation? Or do you want the translator to translate it literally so that you can then think, I wonder what the words mean? And then you can look into a commentator and see how he read the words and how he interpreted them to mean what he said, or you won't, and you know there's something there to question. There are, for example, Rabbi Kaplan did a translation of the whole Torah, the Living Torah, but he packed into the translation a lot of rabbinic comment. And if you want that, and people do want it, I have nothing against it. So if that's one good translation to use. But if you want a more literal translation, there's, I think, the interlinear. I have trouble with the art school. I must tell you, I have trouble with it. I'm not alone. It's difficulties in it. The ones who did the interlinear siddur, I think there's an interlinear, like word for word translation. There you can match the words in the translation with the Hebrew, which could be useful. But every translator makes decisions. Shall I say it this way? Shall I say it that way? And there are honest ways to do it more than one way. So I don't think there's going to be one that's the best. The question is what you want to use for your purposes. For me personally, I wanted it literal because I wanted to see how the translators dealt with the literal language and what they did with it. So I myself would learn how to read the literal language. I didn't want to just be packed in as if it were what the text said straight. So that's my feeling. The closer it is to the literal, it has that value, that advantage.
Are you allowed to recommend an interlinear?
I tried to remember. I know it was interlinear. It was called that, but more than that, I don't know. And there may be better ones than the one, but you can ask around for the one that's most literal, and then use that.
Art Scroll is just the most trusted interlinear style.
But which art school?
The company Art Scroll, that they'll take like the Chumash and they'll do an interlinear version of its translation.
Of its own translation. Yeah, but the art school translation is.
It's not the same, but like in terms of English translations, aren't they the most credible company doing it?
As I said, different translations have different foci, and the art school translation, I think. I teach it because somebody gave us 50 copies of it, but often I have to correct the translation. So.
Their interlinear is different than their regular one. Like they use different language.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that. Oh, so I don't know. Then I haven't experience with that. I don't know.
I'm not sure if it's one we use, but I heard a story from somebody studying at Machon Yaakov that one year the guys there compiled all of the errors and sent them to Art Scroll, and Art Scroll responded that they don't want to like beef up the translation because it was too like advanced for the average reader or something. I don't know.
Okay.
Could be rumor. I don't.
As I said,
recorded.
that's exactly what I meant when I said that the translations have different purposes, and no single one is going to do the whole job. So you have to know what you want out of a translation. But I would, if I were doing it over again, I would do that. I would look for the one that's most word for word. When you one thing that art school if you get a translation word for word, okay, and you have a 10-word sentence. Let's say you have 10 words in Hebrew and 10 words in English. If you read the 10 words in English, if you're reading English, it'll be awful. Because, so, and they're reading for someone who doesn't understand Hebrew, so he's just reading the English. Well, okay, then they can't do it that way. But if you want to understand it and deal with it, then it's much better, I think. Yeah.
So before I ask my question, and you actually kind of reminded me to ask this. You're not going to like it, but for people like us who are uneducated and are new to the world of Torah, what would you recommend as one book everyone should read? Besides what the Chumash goes.
Again, it will depend upon the outlook of the person and what he's capable of assimilating. But I would say the one book which probably is the most complete and is the Derech Hashem, the Way of God by Luzzatto. Luzzatto. Shechaim Luzzatto.
Is there a particular copy you like? Because the one
Yes.
on Amazon, the blue cover, I really didn't like it.
I don't know which one they have, the blue cover, but Feldheim has
Feldheim?
the
Okay.
it's done by Abba Tzvi Neiman, who I had the privilege of being his chavrusa in the Mir about 106 years ago. And he knows the Ramchal's work both. I mean, the Ramchal was a great Kabbalist, in addition to being a great thinker and a great philosopher and all the rest, but he was a great Kabbalist. And Rabbi Naaman has put into it, he has a very voluminous commentary where he asks the questions. I mean, I've been teaching the Ramchal, I started teaching it 40 years ago. I have 40 tapes on my website of the shiurim that I gave on it. So it has a tremendous breadth, in addition to kind of, as I say, depth by choice of vocabulary in teasing with subjects, but has tremendous breadth. So if you're going to read one sefer, I would say that, and get Rabbi Naaman's edition. Then if you have a question or you read his commentary, he'll provoke questions for you. I found that most of the questions that I asked, that I struggled with when I taught it, he asked, and often he gave answers similar to mine. Sometimes I learned from his answers. So I would very strongly recommend that. Now, I think it's like 700 pages, but it's worth it.
Sorry,
And by the way,
there's different ones?
What?
So you said Feldheim at first, and then you said
Yeah.
this other rabbi?
No. Feldheim's the name of the publisher.
Oh, okay.
And the name of the rabbi is Abba Tzvi Naaman. Naiman. Now, it has a tremendous variety of subjects. And I would say you don't have to read the whole Sefer. There's a section on theurgy. What's theurgy? Names that you can pronounce in order to cause angels to do various things that you need them to do. Okay, it's there, and I can only tell you that although there's almost no open Kabbalah in the book, when I asked my Rebbe Zatzal about learning Musar, you know what Musar is? Musar is constructive inspiration to improve your character. He said, read the Mesillas Yesharim by the same author, because it's based on Kabbalah. Now, if you ask people, is this book based on Kabbalah? If they don't know who the Ramchal was, it might be hard for them to answer. But here's just two little sort of flags. How many chapters are there in the Mesillas Yesharim? 26, which is the numerical value of God's four-letter name. And how many characteristics does he discuss? The answer is 10. Oh, yeah, like the 10 spheros, right? Right, like the 10 spheros. So you see the 26, you see the 10, you think, the author's talking Kabbalah. And it's true. It's true. So you know that you're getting something from a person who is himself a master philosopher, but whose orientation, in addition to philosophy, is also Kabbalah. And by the way, for those, I haven't said this recently, and for those who may be listening to a recording, if I say he's a philosopher, that may ring oddly in some people's ears, because how could a Kabbalist be a philosopher? Here's a couple of examples of things that he says. And I think if you understand what a philosophical temperament is, you'll see it right away. We say in the morning, after Baruch Hu, we say twice that God is continuously remaking the creation. So Ramchal asks, why does he do that? Why does he do that? That's a philosophical question. I don't know anybody else who asks it. And what's his answer? His answer is that the purpose of creation is for mankind, which is now represented by the Jewish people, to achieve connection with the Kodesh Baruch Hu. What's called dveikus, attachment to Kodesh Baruch Hu. And you can't achieve attachment to him unless he's available. If he creates the world and, so to speak, goes on vacation and leaves it alone, he's not present for dveikus to take place. creating the world anew, moment by moment, means that his will is giving existence to everything that exists, including the human being, including everything else. So his will, which is of him maybe the most highest element that we can talk about or relate to, his will is available to us. It's present. It's present in the table. It was present in the table. So, wait, just a minute ago you were going high. Now you're low. Make up your mind. So that's why he recreates it. And by the way, he says there's no problem with creating it and just enabling it to go on by itself. He's all powerful. There's no reason why he can't do that. There's no philosophical or metaphysical reason why he can't create something that's permanent. But he didn't do that. He didn't do it because of this desire to be close to us. So you have a metaphysical, philosophical question with a spiritual answer. That's broad. Second of all, someday you'll hear about 4 worlds. There are 4 worlds out of the way the creation was made. There are more, but it's typically 4 that we talk about. Atzilus, Bria, Yitzir, and Asiya. The literature on 4 worlds, there's got to be at least 10,000 references to 4 worlds. Ramchal says, really, there are only 3. One of them isn't a world. Man, you got to be very, very brave to say something like that. The whole literature is telling you why. Because what is a world? Who asks a question like that? What is a world? Who talks like that? Philosophers talk like that. What is a world? A world is a group of entities interacting with one another. Now, the description of the 4 worlds that we have looks like this. There's a world called Atzilus. Below that is a world called Priya, where the first creatures are found. Creations of creatures are found. And Yetzirah is another level on which there are creatures, and Asiya is another level where there are creatures. But on the level of Atzilus, there aren't any creatures. So, you don't have a group of interacting entities on that level. And then the Ramchal says, but you'll ask me, what about the 10 spheros? And what about the partzufim? What about the heichalos and all the other elements that we identify in the spiritual reality, which aren't creatures? And he says, they're all artificial. Really, in any spiritual reality, there's only achdus, there's only oneness, unity. We interact with this unity in various ways, so these words are ways of how we interact with it. But really, it's only one. And since it's only one, the world of Atzilus isn't really a world. Now, I don't know how much you know about philosophy or philosophical temperament. That's a philosopher talking. Define your terms, even the most basic terms, and be willing to draw conclusions from them on the basis of your definitions. So he is really a philosopher, and really a Kabbalist, and all the rest. But he really is a philosopher. It's not unfair to call him a philosopher. Yeah, Bosnach. Yeah.
Do you have kind of a good way for dividing your time during the day, like learning and everything in general?
I hope it's good. You know, there's one way you can test whether your division of time is ideal for you. It's not the only test, but it's one way to test it. Now, it'll be dated if I say $1 million, so let's say I'll say 10 million. Suppose someone offers you $10 million. How would you change your life? What would you do differently? And if it would revolutionize your life, then that means that you are doing some things just because you don't have more money. If you wouldn't change your life significantly, that means what you're doing is because, at least you're not doing it for money. You're doing it because there's the things you have chosen to do because of their value themselves. And I think this is going to vary from person to person, and it will certainly vary in the times of your life. When you're getting married and when you're having children, the structure of your day is going to be very different from the day in which the last child gets married and packs up. And as we say, it's wonderful when they come and it's wonderful when they go. The empty house syndrome, not everybody suffers from that because they have other things to do. My time, I'm so blessed. I have wonderful chavrusas I have at least 3 chilvusas a day, sometimes 4. And each one of them is gold. It's just gold. In fact, in the introduction to my new book coming out, I give credit to them. It's like to have such people as be able to learn with is such a blessing, such a bracha. And I do my own learning during the day. I teach in the yeshiva. And Baruch Hashem, family, just came now from a bris of a great-grandchild. Family, not to mention my better half.
What's the book about?
The book is about individual providence, based principally on the writings of Maimonides, of the Rambam. I go through several chapters in the guide, line by line, to try to explain what he meant and try to show what he held, and considering there are some people who, there's a problem of classifying people. He is a Q. First of all, if he's a really great person, you won't be able to classify him because your Q won't do him justice. And when you put him in a box, your picture of him sort of cuts him down to size. And then it depends on what kind of box you put him in. I had a friend who was in graduate school doing Jewish studies, and he told me he had a thesis about the Ramban that he was lenient about working on the intermediary days of the festival to make money because he lived among Jews who were poor and who were struggling and having difficulty managing, and he became very attached to them and his sympathy for them, and that's why he was lenient. I said to him, "Are you crazy?" First of all, he knew the whole of the rabbinic literature. Maybe it's in the rabbinic literature, what he said? Not because he has this psychological tendency and this sympathy and that colors the way he writes his laws. Where are you coming from? And if he has the sympathy, you think he doesn't know he has that sympathy? And he doesn't take it into account when he makes a decision as something that might bias him? No, you know better than he does. This is how you defend yourself. You don't know 1,000th of what he knew, but you know better than he what he was doing. You know better than he than why he was making his decisions, so you're superior to him. You don't hear ego talking there? Ego coupled with chutzpah? Well, it's really, as you can imagine, it irritated me. And I tried to, I don't think I reached him. I don't think I got to him, but the whole idea of it was so. So the same thing's true with our great sages. Someone will say, well, he's lenient. That's why he gave that decision. He's lenient, meaning leniency is an element of his character that leads him to give certain decisions a certain way. No, absolutely not. If 70% of his decisions are lenient, it means that each one he researched and each one he decided that it has to be this way. And the same person who's, let's say, 70% lenient, we look at some of his stringent decisions, you'd say, how could he do that? He's a lenient person. How did he do that? The answer is because he's not lenient. He has features of the tradition that are beyond what you happen to understand, and you don't give him credit. You want to pull him down to your size. Well, you have to resist that. My Rebbe Zatzal was a very loving person, and chesed, loving kindness, was one of his marks of reputation. When I had to be maspid him, I said, I'll give you 5 instances in which he was very strict. Very strict, unsympathetic, because he's not a prisoner of his character. His character is what he uses to express what he wants to express. You can't categorize people. So I think that's extremely important. Yeah.
So if you're in a competitive field, for example, you're like a lawyer, and when you're praying for your success, it will result in the failure of the opposing lawyer. For example, if he's a Jew, can you pray for your success? Pray for his downfall?
That's a very good question. I think what you would have to pray for is that justice and utility be done. let me transpose it for a moment to another profession, and then maybe we'll be able to bring it back to law, or maybe not, but maybe we will. Let's imagine that the person who needs surgery, that's the question, which surgeon he's going to choose. Should I pray that I should be the surgeon? Suppose Frank is a better surgeon than I for this surgery, and he's more likely to survive. Do I really want that I should have it and have the guy have less chances to survive? I hope not. I hope what I would pray for is that he get the best surgeon for him. And if it's not me, I don't want to stand in the way of his getting a better surgeon. I wouldn't feel good about that. So I think the same thing would be true with law. I mean, who's going to do the most justice? You know, if you're competing with somebody else, now here I'll give you an example where you can be competitive without having that catch. Let's take a criminal case. Right? The job of each lawyer is to present the best case for his side. The job of the prosecutor is to give the most solid argument that he's guilty. And the job of the defense is to, careful now, show that the prosecutor hasn't succeeded in showing that he's guilty. The job of the defense is not to show he's innocent. That's not his job. His job is only to show that the prosecutor hasn't shown that he's guilty. So I want my case to be the best case possible. Do I want to win? Well, you know, I mean, there's this guy, and maybe he committed the crime, and maybe, like, I don't know. But I don't want to feel later, I should have said that. I should have put that in. I made a mistake. I should have taken that into account. I don't want to feel I didn't do the best job that I could. But to pray that I should win and he should lose, I don't see how you could do that.
Well, the reason why I said a lawyer is because, like, for, let's say someone's on death row, it's a bit different. But if you two lawyers doing, like, a merger law case,
Yeah.
your job is dependent on his failure. Like, your prayers need to be that he fails, and that I'm better, so that I can get my parnasa, my company, and my job, whatever. Like, you have to have him fail to succeed.
I don't know in detail. Maybe this is a good question to ask Rabbi Bradowitz. He certainly knows much more than I do, and he's had more experience with these kinds of things than I have, for sure. But I can't see the rectitude of a prayer that the person should fail. The two of you are trying to serve your employers. Mm-hmm. And who knows, in the scheme of what the Kodesh Baruch Hu wants for the world, which employer should win? Which employer should have the upper hand in the negotiations? I think that you can pray for your own Hatzlacha. See, Kodesh Baruch Hu is, you don't have to think of Kodesh Baruch Hu limited in such a way. You think that the only way that you can win is by the other guy failing. You don't know that. You don't know that. Could be that the competitor company will suddenly get an opportunity for which they need all the resources and drop it all together. So you take it. We don't need it. We have a chance to make 10 million. You're fighting over 1 million, we'll make 10 million. Goodbye. And then you're successful, and they don't lose out. Nobody has to fail. Because Baruch Hu can run things in a variety of ways. So I think you can pray for your own success, but to pray for the other guy's downfall, only when the person is evil can you pray for the other person's downfall. And I want to mention something here because I just learned it recently, and it bears on something that we have a siddur, or a tillim, or it needs a tillim. I've said it many times because I was quoting a Gemara, and I didn't obey my own rule that. Thank you very much. I think this has tillim. Yeah, that's it. And I didn't follow my own rule that everything is complicated. So I said many times, I'll tell you what I said, and then I'll tell you what I discovered now. Rabbi Meir had some people in his neighborhood who really made life difficult for him. And they did it in nasty ways. And he prayed that they should die. And his wife, Bruria, said to him, it's not appropriate. However you translate the word chatoim in the grammar, you should pray that the sins should disappear. Not that the sinners should die. And the way the sins could disappear would be that they would reform and stop doing wrong things. So he changed his prayers, and that in fact is what happened. They stopped doing wrong things, he stopped suffering, and they didn't die, but they were reformed. So I used to say that Gemara and say, look, that's the idea, you know. You don't pray that people should die. I just had a birthday and I became 82. Now, there is a custom of saying the psalm which is for the year you're in. So I'm now saying every day Psalm 83. Psalm 83 is a petition that the enemies of the Jewish people should perish. And it's quite graphic about how they should perish. And towards the end, and this when I started doing it a few weeks ago, this bothered me until I actually looked it up in the commentaries. It says, crush them like a wheel, like straw before the wind, with fire, burn them up like burning a forest, and like a flame singes the mountains, so you should pursue them with your storm, and your storm should overwhelm them, fill their faces with shame and disappointment, and they should seek your name, Hashem. They should be embarrassed and terrified forever, and they should be utterly destroyed. So I thought, hey, wait a minute. It got to the point where they're calling out to Hashem. And then you continue that they should be utterly destroyed? I mean, why not say if they're calling out to Hashem? So then, reach out a hand to them, help them do better, and so forth. They're calling out to Hashem. It bothered me what exactly it's supposed to mean. And if you look carefully at the preceding parts of the psalm, it's talking about those who want to destroy the Jewish people. Ring a bell, maybe? Want to destroy the Jewish people? And destroy the Torah. And here it says, even if through your punishment of them and your pursuit of them, they call out to your name, destroy them anyway. Destroy them anyway. And then the result will be, they, the onlookers, shall know that your name is alone above the whole earth. In other words, a person's evil can get to a point where we don't pray for him to repent anymore. We pray for him just to be destroyed. There is such a thing. So now, having said that, we have to realize that each case has to be treated separately. You can't simply have a blanket rule. No, we would always want the person to do tshuva. Similarly, there's a phraseology. You probably have heard this, that when the Egyptians were drowning in the sea, and the angels wanted to say praise of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, "Maseh yadai tov im b'yam," work of my hands are drowning in the sea, and stop the angels from saying praise. That's a long story because we did say praise, and it's Az Yashir, we say it every morning, but anyway, he did stop the angels from saying praise. But with Achav, who was Jezebel's husband, the king, and he was not as clever and not as dedicated as she, but just as evil as she. When he died, the Jewish people then rejoiced. And the Gemara asks this question. The Gemara says, but doesn't it say, the work of my hands is drowning the river, and the Kodesh Baruch Hu doesn't want rejoicing when the wicked people are destroyed? And the Gemara answers, Ba'avod Rishoim Rina. When the wicked perish, there is joy. And the people can have joy when the wicked perish. So then, of course, if you're putting two and two together, you'll have to say that when he stopped the angels from saying praise, it's because they were angels. Angels are on a different level, and they have a different perspective. Human beings are on a different perspective, and it's a different level, and it's a whole long story. But there is a point where you can pray for people to be destroyed. In our context, I have only one little, one little shall I say, expression that might be worthwhile. Humanitarian aid is only for human beings. And that's an exclusion. There are others who don't deserve humanitarian aid. They don't behave like humans.
I heard from somebody, not a rabbi, just another person, attempting to get on the derech, that if you learn a halacha, and you learn the more stringent opinion of the halacha, that you're obligated to follow it. I feel like I've heard otherwise, that you ought to just observe, like, you ought to know where you're holding and take whatever you think is more sustainable, meaning, like, if the more lenient opinion is more sustainable for you where you're holding right now, to take that one. So
So first of all, this whole idea that if you learnt a halacha, you're now obligated to do one thing or another, absolutely not. Not at all. You learn a halacha from a book. There are other books. There will be other opinions. You're not committed to the fact that because you learned a halacha. If you go and ask a rabbi and you ask him for a legal decision, that creates certain types of obligations. The way I usually put it is this. Suppose you go to the rabbi and ask him a question. He takes out a Mishnah Berurah and he reads to you the words of the Mishnah Berurah. That could obligate you. And if you read the words, it wouldn't obligate you. Because asking a shayla carries with it certain obligations. But learning, number one. Number two, everyone makes decisions like that. Everyone. No one is a complete perfection in his own eyes. Everyone has different areas which need improvement. And if not everyone, 99.99% of everyone makes decisions which ones to work on now and which ones to defer for later. Because no one has energy to work on everything at once. So everybody is making decisions as to what is appropriate for my situation and what isn't. And in the case of people who are developing their attachment to Yiddishkeit, this goes on all the time. And the one criteria, I have a whole share on this, but I'm not going to say it now, we don't have time. The one criterion that occurs to people and is dead wrong is to say, well, let's see, if I'm deciding between A and B, look and see which legally is more important. Some halachas are more important than others legally, and then do the more important one first. No, that's not an appropriate criterion. A person could be asking, what shall I do? Keep Shabbos or make blessings before I eat? Now, keeping Shabbos is one of the 10 pronouncements of Sinai, as we read in the Torah last week. And it's mentioned a dozen times in the Torah, and deliberate, warned disobedience carries a death penalty, and making blessings before you eat is rabbinic. So, in terms of importance, there's a gigantic gap there, but it might be right for him to make blessings and not keep Shabbos. That might be the right decision. So the decision not made in terms of just the legal importance of the halachas involved. One way that has to be done, it's very hard for the individual himself to do it, is I think the long-term effect of doing it one way or the other. I know of a case, it's actually published, but I don't have permission to use the name, but Rabbi's name, maybe you'll look it up. A 14-year-old girl was in contact with one of the poskim, one of the decisors. She had decided to keep Shabbos, and her parents told her, in our house, you will not keep Shabbos. She wrote to the posik, what should she do? Posik said, don't keep Shabbos. Now, as you all know, I think, your parents do not have the authority to tell you not to keep Shabbos. They don't have the authority to tell you not to wash your hands before you eat. A parent has no authority to contradict God's Torah. But you set up a war between a 14-year-old girl and her parents, it's overwhelmingly likely the parents are going to win. So that means she'll lose everything. I saw this when I was becoming frum in university. We had a small group of guys and girls who were becoming frum, and there was one boy who was a sophomore. His parents found out about it. They took him out of college for a year and sent him to a psychiatrist. And when he came back, he was cured. The psychiatrist brainwashed him into the point where he just couldn't relate to religion anymore. So I know they can do that. They can beat it out of the child. So only a great posek can take responsibility for saying something like that, but it isn't true that it's just the legal importance. So it really does have to fit in with where you are, what your resources are, and what the consequences will be. Sometimes there are unforeseen consequences. You could do something, and your family can be very upset with it, and all of a sudden you're faced with a very serious life problem. And if somebody can anticipate that for you and tell you that's likely to happen, that's good. And if not, you may have to change your mind. Say, well, I thought I would be able to handle it. I can't handle it now. I'll handle it better another time. Yeah.
What's the turnaround time for prayer? For instance, if you were in the hospital in pain, you're saying like, please make the pain go away, and then it goes away. It's probably not going to go away as soon as you say, please make it go away. But if it goes away in 15 minutes, was the prayer answered?
Very different. Oh, you mean to see when the prayer is? Yeah, I thought you meant when to quit praying because it doesn't happen.
Oh, I'd be happy.
That's also.
Yeah.
The only thing I can say is that if it's very unusual, then you take note of it. If this is usually a long-term condition. There have been cases like that. They do an MRI, and they say, look at the reading. Yeah, I have a friend who had a growth in his chest, and we learn every day. It was a long time ago. He had a growth in his chest, and he had that surgery, and the surgeon said, I'm going to have to take the whole thing out because I'm sure it's malignant. But he did a biopsy. He sat down at the lab, and the lab said benign. And the surgeon said, it can't be. He did a second biopsy. Set it down, came back benign. He did a third biopsy. It was supposed to take 2 hours, it took 5 hours. 3 times the lab said it's benign. He closed them up and told my friend, I can't explain it. My experience tells me it had to be malignant, but it wasn't. Or at least it wasn't when he did the surgery. So then you say, wow, if we prayed for that, because it's very, very rare for something like that to happen. But if it's like a migraine, and and sometimes it goes away in 15 minutes, sometimes in 3 hours, then I wouldn't say.
Then the follow-up question that you thought I was asking is like, when do you stop praying?
That's another one. That's very difficult. I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know. Where that's really tragic is people want to get into medical school, and many of them, their whole attitude towards life is, if I'm not a doctor, I'm not alive. If they don't get in, they're only living for next year's applications. In the meantime, nothing happens. Nothing's there. Nothing means anything. And then when to give up on that is very, very difficult. I have no answer to that question. Okay.